Hola a todos, amigos queridos. Acá estoy en el honor de estar con un gran amigo y gran referente del mundo Lean Agile, que es Jim Benson. Tuve el honor de conocerlo, por eso yo lo voy a explicar un poco después. Por ahora voy a introducir y vamos a ir conversando con Jim. Por ahora voy a hacer mi mejor inglés para tratar de sacar el mejor provecho de contar con él. Y bueno, el resto del video va a estar con subtítulos en castellano para que ustedes los puedan utilizar. I had the pleasure of meeting Jim and Tonian. Tonian is the partner of Jim in Most Cooperandi in 2014, who visited us in Chile, sharing their experience and friendship with the local Agile community. Okay.
I'm surprised that like I say, I'm shocked that 8 years have gone by already. We really should have been back by now.
Yes, let's do that.
Yep.
Tell us a bit about you, your professional journey, and how you got into the world of Lean and Kanban.
Okay. My professional journey is a journey. It's not I went to school and learned Kanban and now I'm Kanban. So my professional journey starts when I was a little kid. I've always liked doing things, writing things, building things. So when I was a very little kid, I had my own little newspaper, and then I started mowing lawns, and then I started painting houses and all of these things. So I've always wanted to learn and build businesses. When I was a teenager, I went into the business of being an angry punk rocker. So we had to figure out how to play instruments, how to make records, how to distribute them, how to get people in Paris to pay attention to a bunch of kids in the middle of Nebraska and buy our records, because no one in Nebraska was going to buy our records. And so we had to learn production. We had to learn what the market wanted. We had to learn advertising. We had to learn all these things as kids, allegedly being anti-corporate, but all we were building was a little corporation. Stamp and Go Records was a little corporation. So then from there, I became a full-time punk rocker for about a year, realized that was not a good idea. And I went back and got a degree in civil engineering and urban planning, and went off to build freeways and subways. And I was always the engineer that knew something about computers. So when transportation technology came about, cameras, sensors in the roadways, variable message signs, those things, I fell into that, which then made me start a software company, which made me become Agile, which is a funny story in and of itself, because when William Rowden and I started our company, one of William's friends said, hey, if you're going to do this software thing, you should meet our friend Kent Beck.
Oh, wow.
And so we got a pre-press copy of XP Explained.
Okay.
And so we were literally one of the first Agile shops in the world. And at that time, there were no rules for Agile.
Exactly.
So we never accepted any of the Scrum rules or anything else. Even Kent's rules were always things that we could work with. So when we invented Kanban, when Dave Anderson and I invented Kanban, I remember us talking about it because we invented it because we were trying to figure out a way to implement the stuff in Dave Anderson's book, Agile Management. And so we come up with Kanban, and then we think we're going to be heralded as heroes of the Agile community. And then the next thing I know, I'm in the middle of Agile wars. I still don't quite understand how that happened, but there we were. And now, after reading the book Personal Kanban, which won a bunch of awards and brought us down to CU, now I'm up to this, which is the next step for us. The collaboration equation is the next step. It's how do we do what we really set out to do in 1998 with Agile? How do we really do that and get away from all of the trappings of Scrum, Kanban, XP, DAD, RUP, SAFe, blah, 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 blah. How do we actually just decide what do we need to do as professionals in order to do a professional job? And that's what this book's about.
Let's talk about the Personal Kanban. The book Personal Kanban presents a new look at the psychological experience of overwork, or a lot of WIP, or work in progress. No, a great quote that I always use from you is, "You can't manage what you can't see." Yeah, and that's the very start of any agile transformation. The like from personal Kanban is exactly the personal in the title. It's about the individual experience.
That was about 2 or 3 years, I think, into the Kanban journey. And I was living in Washington, D.C. I was working with Tony Ann already by that point, and we were working with all of the intelligence community of the United States. So the CIA, the NSA, Army intelligence, Navy intelligence. We've got way more intelligence than you would expect. So yeah, we've had the weirdest clients. We've had the most wonderful clients over the years. But when we were working with them, we were doing two things. We were on Twitter kind of talking about personal Kanban and as an idea, but the book hadn't been written yet. And we were working with these people. How do you exchange information with each other? How do you work together? And they had such a specific information need. And then at the same time, the world was like saying, hey, now that I have this personal Kanban, or now that our team has a Kanban, we can actually start doing Agile. It became very clear that there's work that I do by myself, there's work that we do with the team, and then there's work that the company has to do, and that no one was paying attention to the individual. So we wanted to say, look, if you just do Scrum or you just do XP, you're still going to overload individuals because you don't know what every individual is doing in total. You just know what they want to report on the board. So we want to start to see everything that everybody else is doing so that we can make sure that we don't overload them, they don't overload us, and that when people have problems, we know when and how we can help. And that was the big reason for the personal Kanban book. And since we wrote that, I would say 35 or 40% of our customers have been software.
Okay.
So it's had very universal appeal. We've worked with banks, we've worked with hospitals, we've worked with insurance companies, because everyone works and they all work in the same way. And that also was really important to me because I had kind of bought into this whole Agile idea that software is special.
Exactly.
No, we're just people. We're just people doing work. That's it.
A special thing about the personal Kanban is that it's based only in two simple principles. Yep. Can you remember them?
Yeah, they're visualize work and limit your work in progress.
That the people said WIP is translated at trabajo a medio hacer, have done work. Your most recent book is the collaboration equation.
Yes.
Who is for what are the people that you are trying to teach with that book?
So the collaboration equation itself is individuals work in teams to create value. And we are all individuals.
In any discipline.
Yes, in any discipline.
Exactly.
We are all individuals, we all work in teams, and we all create value. And the value that we create is always similar to what other people do, and it's always unique. Just like all of us. We all have faces, mostly all of us walk around or get around somehow. Eating is generally a pretty common thing human beings do, but we're all unique. And there's no one way to be a human being. And there's also no one way to run your team. And so over the last 4 years before COVID, we had the great opportunity of working with one of the largest construction companies on earth, building skyscrapers, hospitals, giant buildings with literally multi-billion-dollar price tags. So at the beginning of every billion-dollar project, it's like a new startup. It's a new fully funded company. and it has a management structure, it has payments, it has tons of contractors, like ridiculous number of contractors. And so at the beginning of every project at Turner Construction, they do something called a right environment exercise, where they sit down and they say, okay, as a group on this project, what do we as professionals need to know in order to work together to get this job done? And then they get that. So at one of the projects I worked on, they wanted a dog. So they got a dog. Whatever they needed. You need coffee, you get coffee. You need a dog, you get a dog. But what we started to put into every one of those was real visual management.
Okay.
So there's a Kanban there. There's Kanbans all over the place. Personal Kanbans, group Kanbans, team Kanbans, temporary Kanbans. That's great. But there's a million other types of visualizations in a room that's called an Obeya.
Obeya.
Yes.
The war room.
Yes. Yes. And so the point of this book is that we need to be able to manage ourselves as individuals. We have to understand that we never work alone, ever. We always, even if it's just us doing something for one customer, there's still a partnership there. There's still collaboration there. So there's us, there's our teams, there's teams working with other teams, blah, 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 blah. Every one of those teams and every one of those individuals is learning something every day. And they're working on things every day. So we would set up these big Obeyas in these trailers, and not only would the Turner team, the team of engineers building the building, not only would they do better, but the trades, the plumbers, the woodworkers, the iron workers, the workers themselves were coming into the trailer to look in the room to see what was going on every day. And before that, those tradespeople never came into the room. They never came into the trailer at all because they hated management, and the trailer was management, right?
Okay.
So the book describes how we work as individuals, how we work as teams, how to set up a right environment where your professionals can actually be professional. And then it talks in the end about what we call collaborative leadership. And we say leadership isn't a role, it is an action. So if you're an individual person on a team and you see that something needs to be done and you do it, that is leadership. And Turner is a 120-year-old company in New York in construction, and they were able to do this.
Okay.
So if a company like that is able to do this, our software teams certainly should be able to have more psychological safety, more agency, more respect for each other. That servant leadership is something we should seriously rethink. We don't want servant leadership. We want leaders to be part of the team, and there's a difference. Exactly. So we want, so leaders as a role, or management as a role, has a definite thing to do. You have to do it. But we get into things all the time with agile groups where they'll say, okay, well, we're going to do a right environment exercise with your agile team, and we'll get in there and there'll be no managers. Like no scrum master, no product owner, no team, no whatevers. And then we'll go and find them and say, why aren't you here? I say, well, we wanted the team to be able to choose for themselves. And we're like, oh, so you're not part of the team. Get your butt in there.
We found here with our customers that many leaders, their main work is to derive work from one people to other. Let's take this work, let's say the item, and
they're Jira.
In Jira,
they're Jira, yes. I'm a human version of Jira.
Exactly, they are. We call them routers because they are routing work. And some days from the assignation, they say, how are you doing with your work? And when they are faced with this collaborative way of work, they say, Well, we participated from the training, but now the team is assigned, and some days from now I will check if they are working well. That is self-management, and they said that is what we're trying to do. We're trying to do is co-management. All people managing the work with leaders, obviously. The self-management work is very dangerous work.
So just one other quick story. I know you're trying to end, but I have one other quick story. So in the States, in Louisville, Kentucky, there's a plant that makes all of the General Electric home appliances.
Okay.
And there are different buildings on their campus or on their property, and each building builds a different thing. So one builds washers, one builds dryers, and one particular plant 5, builds this one type of refrigerator.
Okay.
If you go from building to building, each building has its own CEO. It's treated like its own little company. And at that plant, that was the plant where they put in an Obeya. And it was the plant where their CEO, their leader, tried to get everybody else to exhibit leadership. And this Obeya was in this huge blue room, and in it was all of the sales data for the refrigerators, shipping problems that they were having, like with individual carriers. Obviously, there were quality tracking and things like that, but most of the information was things that a line worker, an assembly line worker, would never need to know. Every day, assembly line workers went in and looked at everything. They looked at how it was selling. They looked at how blah, 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 blah. The mood, the professionalism, the quality of that plant was way higher than the other plants because of that additional information that most managers or leaders would say that people don't need to know. And indeed, like if you talk to an overworked software developer, they're like, I don't care what we're selling and stuff. I just need to get my tasks done. They're saying that because they're overloaded and because they're used to being uninformed. So the Obeya is super important if you're, so personal Kanban is kind of like the step into being able to manage your own work. But if you don't know what's going on in the company around you, you will always be optimizing horrible, crappy work.
Exactly.
So we want to make sure that everyone is informed so they don't make the same mistakes other people make. So they know when other people need their help, and they know who to ask when they need help. Exactly. And that's how we become successful, whether we're leaders, whether we're not leaders, whether we're management, whether we're not management, whether we're a company. When we get together, that's how we become successful.
In South America, we are fans of soccer. We call football. Do you call soccer? And do you remember the book This Is Slim?
Yes.
Yes, it's a great book.
Yep.
It uses a soccer-based metaphor about the team that all players are only interested in kicking the ball and not making goals. And if the whole team has the information about how many goals did you reach, and they are motivated, they are synchronized, they are aligned. But if they don't have the information, they even work against their co-players, getting the ball and kicking from everywhere, every time, and they don't have any idea what it's the goal of the game.
And now we understand why velocity is a vanity metric.
Exactly.
Because velocity is measuring maybe how much stuff you get done, but it's not measuring whether or not you created 500 pounds of technical debt when you did that by building the wrong thing at the wrong time, or in the wrong way, or without the right amount of information. So I always tell my software developers, I don't care how much you do. I care about how much you don't have to redo. I see so many software teams going crazy trying to raise their velocity and then ignoring the looming pile of technical debt behind them.
That in Lean, it's called failure demand.
Yep.
How many work you are doing that you really don't have to
Yep.
be doing.
Exactly.
Well, Jim, it's been a great time with you. Hopefully, you can have you soon in Chile or South America.
I would love that. I would love to come down and do one of these right environment exercises with somebody at some point.
Okay, a great hug.
Great. Thank you so much.